The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed like angry hornets, casting a sterile pallor over the chaos of the night shift at Mercy General Hospital. It was just past midnight in the dusty outskirts of a forgotten Nevada town, where the air carried the faint tang of sagebrush and distant rain. Little Mia Reynolds, no more than 7 years old, huddled on the examination table, her small frame trembling under a thin paper gown. Her wide eyes, red-rimmed from tears, darted toward the door, as if expecting shadows to swallow her whole. Bruises bloomed like dark flowers on her arms, vestiges of violence that no child should ever bear. She clutched a frayed, stuffed rabbit, its button eyes staring blankly, while the attending physician, Dr. Harlan, barked orders at the nurses with the impatience of a man who'd long ago traded empathy for efficiency. Nurse Sophia Grant had seen too many nights like this in her decade on the floor. At 34, with calloused hands from years of stitching wounds and soothing fears, she moved through the ER like a quiet guardian angel, her scrubs stained with the invisible weight of unspoken stories. Sophia's own past was a mosaic of scars, a childhood lost to a father's abandonment, a promise whispered to her late mother to always protect the vulnerable. Tonight, that promise ignited when she overheard Dr. Harlan's curt dismissal in the hallway. "The girl's story doesn't add up," he muttered to the charge nurse, his voice laced with skepticism. "Probably just another attention seeker. Document it minimally. We don't need the paperwork." Sophia's blood ran cold. Mia had arrived alone, dropped off by a neighbor after a frantic call about a family dispute. The child's whispers to Sophia earlier, halting words about rough hands and locked doors, painted a picture no report could erase. She couldn't stand by. As Dr. Harlan approached the room, clipboard in hand, Sophia stepped in front of the door, her voice steady but edged with steel. "Doctor, we need to call child services right now. This isn't minimal, it's a clear sign of aggression. She's terrified." Harlan's face twisted into a scowl, his authority challenged in the dim glow of the hallway monitors. "Grant, you're out of line. I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. Step aside, or I'll have you written up." The other nurses averted their eyes, the hum of ventilators and distant sirens filling the tense silence. Sophia didn't budge. She knelt beside Mia instead, gently brushing a strand of hair from the girl's forehead. "It's okay, sweetie. I'm here. No one's going to hurt you anymore." Mia's tiny hand gripped Sophia's, a silent plea that sealed the nurse's fate. The confrontation escalated quickly. Harlan radioed security, accusing Sophia of insubordination and interference with protocol. Within minutes, the ER supervisor arrived, a stern woman named Mrs. Ellis, clipboard clutched like a shield. "Nurse Grant, your actions undermine the team's cohesion. We're understaffed as it is, and drawing attention to unverified claims could invite scrutiny we don't need." Sophia's heart pounded, but she stood tall, her voice rising just enough to carry. "Unverified? Look at her. This hospital is supposed to protect people, not bury their pain under red tape." Whispers rippled through the staff lounge as the scene unfolded. Nurses peeking from behind curtains, the scent of antiseptic mingling with the metallic bite of fear. Mia watched it all, her rabbit pressed to her chest, as if understanding the storm brewing around her. By 2:17 a.m., the decision came down from administration via a terse email to Sophia's phone. Immediate suspension pending investigation, effective termination if protocols weren't followed. She was escorted out through the back entrance, the cool desert night air slapping her face like a betrayal. Her keys jingled uselessly in her pocket as she walked to her beat-up sedan, the parking lot lit by sodium lamps that turned everything orange and unreal. Tears stung her eyes, not for the job she'd loved, but for Mia, left behind in that cold room, her fragile trust shattered anew. Sophia slid into the driver's seat, the engine coughing to life with a reluctant growl. She drove home through empty streets lined with flickering neon signs, the radio murmuring forgotten country ballads about lost causes and second chances. In her small apartment, she collapsed onto the couch, the weight of the night pressing down like an unyielding fog. Miles away, in a weathered garage on the edge of town, Daniel Hawthorne tinkered with the chrome beast that was his Harley-Davidson. At 42, Hawk was a relic of harder times, a former Marine whose body bore the invisible shrapnel of deployments in forgotten wars. His hands, rough from years of wrenching engines and gripping handlebars, paused as his phone vibrated on the workbench. The screen lit up with an unknown number, but the area code was local. He wiped grease from his fingers on a rag, the scent of oil and leather filling the air, and answered. "Thorne." The voice on the other end was frantic, belonging to an old army buddy who'd heard the ER drama through the grapevine. "Hawk, it's about your girl, Mia. Something went down at the hospital tonight." A nurse stood up for her, but they canned her. Kids still there and... Man, it's bad. Hawk's grip tightened on the phone, the world narrowing to a pinpoint. Mia, his daughter from a fleeting relationship years ago, a secret he'd guarded fiercely after her mother's passing. He'd been distant, haunted by ghosts of battles past, but he'd promised her on her 5th birthday, under a starlit sky, that he'd always come when she needed him. A promise buried under miles of road and regret, but never forgotten. The garage light flickered as Hawk's shadow lengthened across the concrete floor. He hung up, his jaw set like forged steel. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, carrying the distant rumble of thunder. He strode to the row of bikes lined up like loyal sentinels, his Iron Oath crew, brothers bound by blood and code, scattered but always a call away. One by one, he fired off texts. "Rally at dawn. Our blood's in trouble. Mercy General pays." The responses came swift, engines revving in his mind's eye, headlights piercing the dark. Hawk mounted his bike, the kickstand scraping the gravel with a sound like a vow renewed. The road ahead stretched into the night, promising justice not in fists, but in the unyielding honor of a father awakened. By sunrise, the hospital's lights would dim under the weight of a father's wrath, and a nurse's courage would find its echo in the roar of 50 engines. The first hints of dawn crept over the jagged horizon like a hesitant promise, painting the sky in bruised purples and fading greys. Hawk's Harley thrummed beneath him, a living pulse that echoed the storm brewing in his chest as he led the convoy out of the shadowed outskirts. The air was crisp, laced with the sharp bite of pine and the earthy musk of dew-kissed gravel. Behind him, the Iron Oath riders fell into formation, 47 strong by the time they hit the open road, their engines a symphony of growls and roars that shattered the pre-dawn silence. These weren't just men on bikes. They were a brotherhood forged in the fires of war and loss, each carrying their own ghosts. Veterans like Tommy Bear Ruiz, whose limp from an old IED never slowed his throttle, or Lena Ghost Harlow, a rare sister in the pack. Her tattoos a map of battles won and promises kept. Hawk's mind raced faster than the wind whipping his leather jacket. Mia's face haunted him. Those wide eyes from the last time he'd seen her 2 years back, when he'd dropped off a birthday card and a stuffed rabbit from a roadside shop, too ashamed of his nomadic life to stay. He'd promised her mother, Eleanor, on her deathbed, to watch over their girl, to be the shield she never had, but deployments and the endless highway had eroded that vow, turning it to rust in his soul. Now the call had dragged it back, sharp as shrapnel. The buddy's words replayed, the nurse who'd fought for Mia, only to be cast out like yesterday's trash. Hawk's knuckles whitened on the grips. Mercy General wasn't just a building, it was a fortress of indifference, and he'd tear down its walls with truth, not bullets. They rode in tight formation, headlights slicing through the thinning dark like knives. The desert stretched endless on either side, sagebrush whispering secrets to the passing shadows. Up ahead, the neon sign of a roadside diner flickered, all-night oasis, its parking lot dotted with semis and weary travelers. Hawk signaled a pull-off, the convoy slowing to a gravel-crunching halt, engines cut, leaving only the tick of cooling metal and the distant cry of a coyote. The riders dismounted, forming a loose circle under the diner's awning, steam rising from coffee mugs as Bear passed around thermoses. Lena leaned against her bike, her dark hair tied back, eyes scanning the group like a sentinel. "Listen up," Hawk said, his voice low and gravelly, carrying the weight of command honed in foxholes. The air smelled of strong brew and exhaust, grounding them in the moment. "Mia's in there alone, scared. Some doc and suits decided her pain ain't worth the hassle. A nurse, Sophia Grant, stood for her, and they fired her on the spot. We ride in quiet, but we ride hard. No chaos, no threats. We demand answers, records, and protection for that kid. Iron Oath don't break promises. We fulfill 'em." Nods rippled through the group, faces etched with quiet resolve. Tommy clapped a hand on Hawk's shoulder, his grip firm. "For Elena's girl, brother, and for all the ones we couldn't save." The words hung heavy, stirring memories of lost comrades, of oaths sworn under starlit skies in distant sands. As the sun breached the horizon, gilding the chrome on their bikes, Hawk's phone buzzed again. It was the buddy, voice hushed from a payphone near the hospital. "Hawk, the nurse just left her place. She's heading back. Says she can't leave the kid like that, but security's on alert. Words spreading about some biker trouble." Hawk's jaw tightened, the first rays warming his face like an accusation. Sophia Grant, a name he'd never heard, but already she was woven into this tapestry of redemption. He pictured her, steady hands in the ER glare, defying the machine for a child's sake. "Tell her to wait, we're close." He pocketed the phone, mounting up as the convoy reformed. The road to Mercy General wound through scrubland, the hospital's silhouette rising like a monolith against the dawn, white walls gleaming falsely pure, emergency lights pulsing like a wounded heart. Sophia gripped the steering wheel of her sedan, the engine's hum a poor substitute for the resolve stealing her spine. She'd barely slept. The apartment's walls closing in with echoes of Mia's whimpers. By 5:45 a.m., she'd thrown on fresh scrubs, defiant, a badge of her calling, and driven back, the desert wind buffeting the car like judgment. The parking lot was emptier than usual, staff shifts changing under the pale light. She parked near the employee entrance, heart pounding as she approached the glass doors. The lobby hummed with early morning routine, a janitor mopping tiles that smelled of bleach, monitors beeping in the distance. But tension crackled. Security guards loitered by the reception desk, their radios crackling with low murmurs. "Miss Grant, you're not authorized," the desk clerk said, her voice clipped, eyes flicking to the guards. Sophia leaned in, voice steady. "I'm here for Mia Reynolds. Child Services was called." The clerk hesitated, then shook her head. "Under review, doctor's orders." Fury simmered in Sophia's chest, but before she could press, a low rumble shook the ground, like thunder rolling in from the clear sky. Through the windows she saw them, a sea of leather and chrome flooding the lot, bikes lining up in precise rows, engines idling with a predatory purr. The lead rider dismounted, tall and weathered, his presence commanding silence from the gathering staff. Hawk. Though she'd never met him, instinct told her this was the father, the storm Mia had whispered about in her fevered dreams. He strode through the doors, the Iron Oath flanking him like shadows, their boots echoing on the linoleum. No weapons, no shouts, just eyes that burned with unyielding purpose. The receptionist froze, hand hovering over the phone. Hawk's gaze locked on Sophia, a flicker of recognition in the chaos. "Nurse Grant?" His voice cut through the hush, rough but respectful. She nodded, surprise mingling with relief. "You're her dad?" He inclined his head, the weight of years in that gesture. Daniel Thorne, but they call me Hawk. Heard you fought for my girl. Now we finish it together. Outside, the convoy waited, a wall of loyalty that no protocol could breach. Dr. Harlan emerged from a side hall, face paling at the sight, the air thick with the scent of impending reckoning. As the group converged on the admin offices, whispers turned to murmurs, the hospital's facade cracking under the moral tide. Mia's room lay ahead, a door between fragility and fury. Hawk paused, hand on the knob, the promise he'd buried rising like the sun. Redemption not in vengeance, but in the quiet power of standing unbroken. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The air in the hospital corridor thickened like smoke from a distant fire, carrying the sterile tang of disinfectant undercut by the faint, acrid bite of fear sweat from the staff huddled in doorways. Hawk's hand lingered on the knob of Mia's room, the cool metal grounding him amid the rising tide of voices echoing off the white-tiled walls. Behind him, the Iron Oath stood sentinel, Tommy Bear Ruiz, cracking his knuckles with a soft pop. Lena Ghost Harlow scanning the exits with eyes sharp as switchblades. Sophia Grant flanked Hawk's side, her scrubs rumpled from the night's unrest, a quiet fire burning in her gaze that mirrored his own. The fluorescent strips overhead hummed relentlessly, casting long shadows that danced like uneasy specters across the linoleum floor. He turned the knob slowly, the click amplified in the hush, and pushed the door open. There she was, Mia, curled on the narrow bed under a starched sheet, her stuffed rabbit clutched like a lifeline. The room smelled of wilted flowers from a forgotten vase and the faint ozone of medical monitors beeping a steady rhythm. Her eyes fluttered open at the intrusion, widening first in confusion, then in a spark of recognition that pierced Hawk like a bayonet. "Daddy." The word was a whisper, fragile as desert wind, but it shattered the dam in his chest. He crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling beside her, his calloused hand enveloping her small one. The bruises on her arm peeked from the gown's edge, dark echoes of harm that twisted his gut. But he focused on her face, tracing the curve of her cheek with a thumb rough from years on the throttle. "It's me, kiddo, I'm here now. No more waiting." His voice cracked, low and gravelly, laced with the regret of roads untaken. Mia's lips trembled, tears carving clean paths down her dust-streaked cheeks. Sophia moved to the other side of the bed, her touch gentle as she adjusted the pillow, murmuring soft reassurances that wove through the tension like a balm. Outside the door, Dr. Harlan's footsteps approached, hurried and clipped, accompanied by the rustle of Mrs. Ellis's starched uniform. The doctor's face, usually a mask of detached authority, now flushed with unease as he burst in, flanked by 2 security guards whose hands hovered near their belts. "Mr. Thorne, this is highly irregular," Harlan sputtered, his clipboard clutched like a talisman. The room's air grew heavier, the monitor's beeps syncing with Hawk's steady pulse. "You can't just barge in with this entourage." "Hospital policy?" Hawk rose slowly, his frame filling the doorway, the leather of his cut creaking softly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of his presence, backed by the silent wall of riders visible through the glass panel, spoke volumes. "Policy? That's what you call burying a kid's cries under forms and favors." His eyes locked on Harlan's, unblinking. The faint scar above his brow, a souvenir from a sand-swept ambush, catching the light. Sophia stepped forward, her voice cutting clean. "You dismissed her pain, doctor. Signs of aggression clear as day, and you waved it off. I reported it, and they threw me out. But she's not lying, and neither am I." Mrs. Ellis interjected, her tone clipped and administrative, eyes darting to the guards. "Nurse Grant, your termination stands. As for you, sir, this is private property. Leave, or we'll involve the authorities." The word authorities hung in the air, a veiled threat that might have cowed others, but Hawk's lips curled in a mirthless smile. He'd faced worse in bunkers half a world away, where promises meant survival. "Call 'em, but first, we're getting records. Every note, every call about Mia Reynolds. And child services now, or my crew starts asking questions downtown, loud ones." The standoff stretched, taut as a guy wire in a gale. Lena slipped into the room, her boots silent on the floor, positioning herself between the guards and the bed. Tommy loomed in the hall, his broad shoulders blocking retreat, while the rest of the Iron Oath remained outside. A sea of chrome and resolve that drew stares from passing orderlies. Whispers spread like wildfire through the wards, the rumble of bikes, still idling in the lot, vibrating faintly through the walls, a reminder of the world beyond protocols. Harlan's Adam's apple bobbed, sweat beading on his brow under the harsh lights. He glanced at Ellis, who nodded curtly, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. By the time the social worker arrived, a weary woman named Abigail Hayes, her folder stuffed with generic forms, the sun had climbed higher, flooding the windows with golden light that mocked the room's chill. Abigail knelt by Mia, her voice soft as she coaxed details from the girl, piecing together the fragments of a home fractured by anger and neglect. Hawk watched from the corner, arms crossed, the scent of his leather mingling with the room's clinical edge. Sophia provided her account, steady and unflinching, her hands clasped to hide their shake. "She told me about the yelling, the grabbing. I saw the marks. It's not unverified, it's real." Harlan hovered, interjecting with qualifiers, but Abigail's expression hardened with each word. "This warrants immediate action," she declared, scribbling notes that sealed fates. The doctor deflated, retreating to the hall where Ellis waited, their murmurs a frantic buzz about liabilities and audits. Hawk caught snippets, references to donations from a local figure, hints of corners cut to keep the lights on. Corruption woven into the hospital's veins like rot in old timber. His promise to Elena resurfaced, sharp and insistent. Protect her, no matter the cost. But this wasn't just about Mia. It was about the system that failed her, that silenced voices like Sophia's. As Abigail arranged for Mia's transfer to a safe house, Hawk pulled Sophia aside in the corridor, the hum of activity resuming around them like a fragile normalcy. Nurses stole glances, the air buzzing with unspoken awe at the bikers who hadn't raised a fist, only a standard of honor. "You didn't have to come back," he said, his voice rough with gratitude. "But you did. For her. That's more than family." Sophia met his gaze, the lines of exhaustion etching her face. "I promised my mom I'd stand for the ones who can't. Firing me, that just lit the fire." A shared nod passed between them, forging an alliance born of quiet defiance. Word spread beyond the walls. Hawk's buddy from the night before alerting contacts in the Veterans Network, whispers reaching local journalists hungry for stories of everyday heroes. By noon, the parking lot swelled with more than bikes. Reporters' vans dotted the asphalt, cameras capturing the orderly line of Iron Oath riders who dismounted to form a human chain at the entrance, ensuring no interference with Mia's departure. Ellis emerged, pale and harried, announcing an internal review that smelled of damage control, but Hawk knew better. The tide had turned, the hospital's indifference exposed under the relentless sun. Mia clung to Hawk as they wheeled her out, the rabbit tucked under her arm, her small hand in his, a tether to the man he'd almost lost himself to be. Sophia walked beside them, her steps lighter, the weight of isolation lifting. The convoy reformed, engines purring to life in a chorus that drowned out the sirens wailing in the distance, not for them, but for the unraveling secrets Mercy General could no longer contain. As they rode out, dust kicking up in golden plumes, Hawk glanced back at the fading monolith, The promise fulfilled wasn't just his. It echoed in every rider, every scar, binding them in a family chosen by fire. Justice, slow and unyielding, rolled forward on the horizon, leaving the corrupt in its wake. The dust settled in lazy swirls behind the convoy as Hawks Harley led the way out of Mercy General's lot. Mia's small form secured in a borrowed sidecar rigged by Lena with the precision of a field medic. The sun hung high now, midday glare turning the asphalt into a shimmering ribbon that snaked through the scrubland, where heat mirages danced like elusive ghosts. The air rushed past, thick with the scent of sun-baked earth and the faint, oily tang of exhaust. A symphony of engines underscoring the fragile piece they'd carved from the morning storm. Hawk kept one eye on the rearview mirror, watching Sophia's sedan trail the pack, her headlights a steady beacon in the formation. She'd insisted on following, her voice firm over the phone earlier. "I'm seeing this through, for Mia, for all of us who got silenced." Back at the hospital, the fallout rippled like aftershocks. Dr. Harlan paced the admin boardroom, the long oak table scarred from years of hasty decisions, its surface now cluttered with steaming coffee cups and scattered files. The room smelled of stale donuts and desperation, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a swarm of indictments. Mrs. Ellis sat rigidly at the head, her fingers drumming a staccato rhythm on a leather portfolio, while a cluster of board members, local businessmen with ties to the town's underbelly, shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Whispers of the bikers' arrival had escalated into a full-blown crisis. Cell phones buzzed with alerts from the parking lot, where reporters now outnumbered the security detail. "We can't let this spiral," Ellis said, her voice a thin wire of control. "Those riders, they're not just noise. Thorne's connected, veterans groups, maybe even state reps, and that nurse. Grant's statement to the social worker ties straight to our funding sources." Harlan leaned forward, his face sallow under the harsh glow, sweat tracing the collar of his lab coat. "I told you to handle it quietly. The girl's case was minimal, family issues, nothing prosecutable. But now, with child services involved, and those photos the social worker took." He trailed off, glancing at Reginald Voss, the silver-haired chairman whose donations had kept the ER's lights on through shady grants and overlooked audits. Voss's eyes narrowed, the faint scent of his expensive cologne clashing with the room's tension. "Quietly. You mean bury it like the others? But this one's got teeth. Thorne's crew's already talking to the press. If they dig into our records—" A knock interrupted, sharp and insistent. The door swung open to reveal Abigail Hayes, the social worker, flanked by a stern-faced detective in a rumpled suit, badge glinting like a promise of reckoning. The air grew heavier, the detective's boots scuffing the carpet as he entered, notebook in hand. "Ms. Hayes here has filed a preliminary report. Multiple indicators of neglect, possible endangerment. We're pulling records on the Reynolds case and any similar ones flagged as minimal in the last year." Harlan's chair scraped back, his protest dying on his lips as Hayes laid a folder on the table, its pages rustling like accusations. Inside were notes from Mia's exam, Sophia's addendum, and timestamps of ignored calls to authorities. "This hospital has a pattern," Hayes said softly, her voice carrying the weight of too many overlooked pleas. "And it stops today." Outside, the Iron Oath had transformed the lot into a vigil of quiet power. Bikes lined the perimeter like iron sentinels, riders dismounted and forming casual clusters, sharing water bottles, murmuring stories of their own lost battles. Tommy Bear Ruiz stood guard at the main entrance, his massive frame a deterrent to any who might slink away, while Lena coordinated with a growing network of allies via her phone, her fingers flying over the screen. The desert wind carried snippets of conversation from the reporters milling nearby. questions about the biker blockade, speculation on the hospital's ties to local corruption. Hawk had parked his bike at the fore, Mia now dozing in Sophia's care inside the sedan, the stuffed rabbit peeking from her lap. He leaned against the handlebars, the chrome warm under his palms, watching the entrance with eyes honed by years of watching horizons for threats. Sophia emerged briefly, rubbing her arms against the rising heat, her face a map of resolve, etched deeper by the morning's trials. Abigail says Mia's safe, temporary foster with a vetted family until custody clears. But the detective, he's onto something bigger. Whispers about falsified reports, favors for donors. Hawk nodded, the leather of his cut creaking as he straightened. His own past flickered in his mind. Nights in bunkers, promising brothers they'd make it home, only to lose them to bureaucracy's cold hand. Good! We don't stop at Mia. This place failed her, like it fails others. My crew's got contacts, vets who know the system, nurses who've been run out. We'll amplify it. She met his gaze, a spark of shared purpose igniting. You kept your promise, after all this time. He looked away, toward the endless blue sky, the wind tugging at his hair. Barely, but seeing you fight reminded me why we make 'em. By early afternoon, the tide swelled. News vans clogged the access road, their satellite dishes blooming like metal flowers against the sagebrush. Inside, Voss called an emergency board meeting, his voice booming through the intercom. All staff to the auditorium. Now. The announcement echoed through the halls, drawing nurses and orderlies like moths to a flame. Sophia slipped back in under the guise of collecting her final paycheck, her badge clipped defiantly to her pocket. The auditorium hummed with unease, rows of folding chairs filled with wide-eyed faces. The air thick with the murmur of speculation and the faint whir of air conditioning struggling against the heat. Ellis took the stage, microphone feedback screeching like a warning, her prepared statement faltering as flashes from smuggled cameras lit the room. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, voice strained, recent events have prompted a thorough internal review. We remain committed to patient care. Boos rippled from the back, where a cluster of nurses, emboldened by Sophia's stand, exchanged glances. One, a young woman named Grace, with tired eyes from endless shifts, stood. Committed, like ignoring bruises on kids or firing the one who spoke up. The room erupted, voices overlapping in a cacophony of pent-up frustration, stories of overlooked cases, pressured sign-offs, the quiet erosion of their oaths under administrative weight. Hawk watched from the lot via a live feed on Lena's tablet, the screen's glow reflecting in his eyes. The exposure was poetic, justice unfolding not in thunder, but in the chorus of truth. Calls flooded the lines, state health officials prompted by the Veterans Network. Journalists piecing together a trail of donations linked to Voss's construction firm, skirting regulations for profit. By late afternoon, sirens wailed, not for arrest, but as ambulances diverted to neighboring facilities, Mercy General's doors grinding to a reluctant halt under emergency suspension orders. Hawk's phone buzzed with confirmation from his buddy. The hospital shuttered pending full investigation, its monolith of indifference finally cracked. As the sun dipped toward the jagged peaks, casting long shadows over the cooling bikes, Hawk approached Sophia's car. Mia stirred, smiling faintly at the sight of him, her hand reaching out. The iron oath revved in salute, a low thunder that rolled across the desert like a vow sealed. Redemption wasn't a single ride. It was this, family forged in fire, promises pulling them forward through the dust. The road home stretched open, carrying the weight of change on its shoulders. If this story of quiet courage and unbreakable bonds has touched you, hit that like button below. It helps spread these tales of honor to those who need them most. The evening sun bled crimson across the desert horizon, turning the endless stretch of highway into a ribbon of molten gold as Hawk's convoy thinned out, peeling off toward their scattered homes like leaves in a fading wind. The air cooled rapidly, carrying the sharp scent of creosote bushes blooming under the first stars, a quiet counterpoint to the day's roar. Mia rode in Sophia's sedan now, the nurse's steady presence an anchor for the girl, who dozed against the window with her rabbit in her lap, the bruises on her skin fading like old ink under the promise of safety. Hawk rode point, his Harley cutting through the twilight, the vibration of the engine syncing with the steady thrum of his thoughts. Behind him, Tommy and Lena brought up the rear, their bikes flanking the car like guardians, headlights piercing the gathering dusk. They pulled into a roadside motel on the town's frayed edge, sunset palms, its neon sign flickering erratically against the deepening blue sky, casting erratic pools of pink light on the cracked parking lot. The place smelled of faded chlorine from an empty pool and the greasy allure of a nearby diner, where fluorescent tubes hummed over Formica counters. Hawk killed the engine first, the sudden silence amplifying the gravel crunch under his boots as he dismounted. Sophia eased the car to a stop, her face pale in the dashboard glow, exhaustion etching lines around her eyes that spoke of battles fought beyond the physical. Mia stirred, rubbing her eyes, and Hawk was there in an instant, scooping her up with a gentleness that belied his weathered frame. "Easy, kiddo. We're stopping for the night. Safe ground." Inside the room, number 7, with its threadbare carpet and curtains yellowed by years of smoke, Sophia busied herself unpacking a small bag of essentials scavenged from the safe-house drop-off. The air was stale, laced with the faint must of old linens, but it felt like sanctuary after the hospital's sterile chill. Mia settled on the bed, her small feet dangling, watching Hawk with a mix of awe and wariness. "Did the bad people go away, Daddy?" Her voice was soft, threaded with the innocence that had nearly been crushed. Hawk knelt to her level, the floorboards creaking under his weight, his leather jacket shedding the day's dust like a skin. He cupped her face, thumb brushing a tear-streaked cheek. "They're facing what they did. But you're with family now. Me, Sophia, the whole crew. We don't let go." Sophia paused in the doorway to the adjoining room, her silhouette framed by the motel's harsh exterior light, arms crossed as if holding herself together. The day's events replayed in her mind, the auditorium's uproar, the board's crumbling facade, Voss's hasty exit under flashing cameras. But victory felt hollow, laced with the ache of what Mia had endured, what countless others still might. "The detective called while we were driving," she said, voice steady but low. "Mercy General's fully shuttered, state order, investigations into falsified reports, donor kickbacks. Harlan's on leave, Ellis too. It won't bring back the time lost, but it's something." Hawk nodded, rising slowly, the scar on his brow catching the lamp's warm glow. His eyes met hers, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Two strangers bound by a child's fragile trust, their own promises intersecting like roads in the night. Outside, the iron oath gathered in the lot, engines off, but spirits revving. Tommy fired up a portable grill, the sizzle of burgers cutting through the cooling air, mingling with the pop of beer cans and low laughter that chased away the shadows. Lena joined them, her phone still buzzing with updates from the network, veterans advocates pushing for reforms, nurses' unions rallying behind Sophia's story. "Word spreading like wildfire," she said, handing Hawk a cold one, the condensation slick on the aluminum. "Your girls' tales hitting the wires, not as victims, but as the spark. Hospitals across the state are auditing now, scared of the same heat." Hawk took a swig, the bitter fizz grounding him, his gaze drifting to the room's window, where Mia's silhouette played with a deck of cards Sophia had found. The crew formed a loose circle, stories flowing like the nearby river's murmur, tales of lost brothers, oaths kept in foxholes and on forgotten fronts. This was their family, chosen in the forge of hardship, where loyalty wasn't spoken but lived in every mile ridden. As night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky like scattered diamonds, Hawk stepped away from the fire's glow, the crackle of flames fading behind him. He leaned against his bike, the metal still warm from the ride, and pulled out his phone. A text from the buddy who'd started it all. "Custody hearing set for next week. Mia's yours if you fight clean. Hospital's donors are squirming. Voss is firm under federal eyes." Hawk's jaw tightened, the weight of redemption settling like desert dust. He'd failed Elena once, letting the road swallow his duties, but tonight, under the vast canopy, he felt the promise renew, not just for Mia, but for the man he'd buried under layers of regret. Sophia emerged, wrapping a sweater around her shoulders against the chill, joining him in the quiet. "She's asleep, talking about riding with you someday, thinks you're a hero from one of her books." He chuckled softly, the sound rough like gravel under tires. "Heroes don't leave for years, but maybe outlaws can come back." She placed a hand on his arm, the touch light but electric, bridging their scars. "You came. That's what counts. My mom always said promises are the chains that keep us human." The wind whispered through the palms, carrying the distant howl of a coyote, a reminder of the wild edges they walked. In that moment, the hospital's fall felt like the first step, not an end, but a beginning, where justice's quiet poetry rewrote the cynical script. Back in the room, Mia dreamed of open roads and gentle hands, the rabbit watching over her like a sentinel. Outside, the crew's vigil held, bikes silhouetted against the moonlit scrub, engines silent but ready. Hawk and Sophia stood together, the night air alive with possibility, the unbreakable bonds of loyalty weaving tighter. Dawn would bring the hearing, the final push against the shadows, but for now, in the heart of the desert's embrace, they rested, forged anew in honor's unyielding fire. The hospital had closed its doors, but the true reckoning rolled on, carried by the roar of chosen family and the weight of words kept sacred. The first light of dawn filtered through the motel's thin curtains like a tentative truce, casting elongated shadows across the rumpled bed, where Mia slept soundly, her chest rising and falling in the rhythm of untroubled dreams. The room carried the faint, comforting scent of cooling coffee from the diner's takeout cups scattered on the nightstand, mingling with the earthy undertone of desert air seeping through the cracked window. Hawk stood by the door, his silhouette broad and unyielding against the pale glow, watching his daughter with an intensity that bordered on reverence. The events of the past day had stripped away the miles of regret, leaving only the raw core of a man reclaiming his oath. Sophia stirred in the adjoining room, the soft creak of floorboards announcing her approach, her hair tousled and eyes heavy-lidded, but alive with a newfound clarity. She joined him silently, handing over a steaming mug, the ceramic warm in his calloused palm. "Hearings in 2 hours," she murmured, her voice a quiet anchor in the hush. Abigail texted, "State's fast-tracking it, your service record, the crew's statements, it's solid." Hawk nodded, sipping the bitter brew, the steam curling like unspoken fears. The iron oath had dispersed at midnight, riders vanishing into the night with promises to reconvene if needed. Their brotherhood, a web of loyalty that spanned states and scars. Tommy and Lena lingered in the lot, tinkering with bikes under the sodium lamps, their low voices a steady hum outside. The motel pool reflected the emerging sky, still and mirror-like, undisturbed by the world's churn. They loaded up as the sun crested the horizon, painting the scrubland in hues of amber and rose. Mia rode with Sophia in the sedan, the nurse's hand occasionally reaching back to squeeze the girls, a bridge of trust forged in crisis. Hawk led on his Harley, the engines growl a proclamation as they wound toward the county courthouse. A squat brick building on the town's sun-bleached main street, its flag snapping in the morning breeze. The air smelled of fresh asphalt and blooming yucca, a deceptive normalcy after the hospital's downfall. Reporters clustered at the steps, cameras flashing like distant lightning, but Hawke ignored them, his focus laser-sharp on the double doors. Inside, the hallway echoed with the shuffle of footsteps and the murmur of clerks, the scent of polished wood and old paper evoking courtrooms from his youth, places where justice was promised but often bartered. The hearing room was modest, panelled walls absorbing the soft light from high windows, rows of benches half-filled with observers, a few veterans in faded jackets, nurses from Mercy General whispering among themselves, and Abigail Hayes at the front, her folder a testament to meticulous advocacy. Judge Harlan, no relation to the doctor, a small Mercy, presided with a gavel that tapped like a heartbeat. Hawke took the stand first, his boots thudding on the worn floor, the leather of his cut whispering as he swore in. His voice, gravel rough from disuse in such settings, filled the space without bravado. I walked away once after Elena passed. Thought the road would heal me, but it just buried the promise, to her, to Mia, to be there. I failed then, won't now. The words hung heavy. Stirring nods from the back, where Sophia sat with Mia on her lap, the girl's fingers twisting the rabbit's ear. Sophia's testimony followed, her scrubs replaced by a simple blouse that couldn't hide the resolve in her posture. She recounted the ER night with unflinching detail, the bruises dismissed, the child's terror minimized, her own firing as the cost of speaking truth. I took an oath to protect, same as any doctor, but oaths mean nothing if they're silenced by fear of paperwork or donors. The judge leaned forward, his glasses glinting, as Abigail presented evidence, hospital logs scrubbed of red flags, Voss's contributions traced to halted investigations. Whispers rippled. The shuttering of Mercy General had dominoed, state auditors uncovering a web of negligence spanning years, Harlan the doctor facing suspension, Ellis resigning in disgrace. Voss's firm, under scrutiny, its contracts frozen like veins in ice. Mia's guardian ad litem spoke last, a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes, kneeling to the girl's level during a recess. "Tell me what you want, sweetheart." Mia glanced at Hawke, then Sophia, her voice a fragile thread. "To go home, with Daddy, and her, she's nice like a mom." The room stilled, the weight of innocence piercing the legal veneer. Judge Harlan cleared his throat, the gavel's final rap echoing like closure. "Temporary custody to Mr. Thorne, with supervised integration, full rights pending follow-up. And Ms. Grant, your actions exemplify the care this system should uphold. Consider this a commendation." Relief washed over Hawke like cool rain, his shoulders easing as he scooped Mia into a hug, her laughter a balm against the scars. Outside, the sun blazed high, the parking lot a hive of activity. Reporters shouting questions, but the Iron Oath's remnants formed a buffer, Lena's glare scattering them like dust. Tommy clapped Hawke's back, his grin wide. Oath kept, brother, family whole. Sophia lingered by the sedan, a job offer already in her pocket from a neighbouring clinic, her firing transmuted into legend among the nursing ranks. "We did it," she said to Hawke, Mia between them, the 3A tableau of mended fractures. He met her eyes, the desert wind tugging at their clothes. "Not we. You started it. I just rode in." But in truth, it was the convergence, the nurse's stand, the father's return, the crew's silent might that toppled the indifferent giant. As they mounted up for the ride home, a modest ranch on the town's edge, bought sight unseen with Hawke's savings, the convoy swelled briefly with locals inspired by the tale, bikes joining in a rolling tribute. The highway unfurled, engines harmonizing with the wind's song, carrying them toward a future etched in honor. Mercy General's closure was the spark. Reforms whispered in state halls promised more, a ripple of accountability born from one child's plea and unbreakable bonds. Hawk glanced back at Mia's beaming face in the sidecar, Sophia's sedan steady behind. The promise to Elena fulfilled not in perfection, but in persistence. In the vast Nevada sky, redemption arched like an endless road, where family chosen outshone blood, and justice, though slow, roared eternal. Thank you for joining us on this journey of courage and unbreakable promises. If these stories of quiet heroism move you, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We deliver new tales every week to inspire and remind us of the power in standing firm.